Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Witty Vitor Podcast. Tonight's conversation is about something deeply serious and deeply current, the growing sense of insecurity felt by Jewish communities across the world. So stay with us to understand it in detail. Thanks for joining us. What happened recently in Australia is not an isolated incident. It's part of a wider global pattern of intimidation, radicalization, and violence that the Jewish communities across the diaspora are increasingly confronting. To understand it, I joined this evening by Ruchie, Avital, and Erez Modaí. Ruchie brings a strong perspective on Jewish life in the diaspora and how global events are felt locally in the land of Israel, both. While Erez offers insight into the cultural, political, and security dimensions of what we are seeing unfold. So thank you both for being here. I'm glad that I can talk with you about this topic, which is it's very sensitive, but I think you are the right people to shed some light into this. So before we begin, just a quick note. If you value thoughtful conversations, sharp chats like this, you are very welcome to subscribe to the channel, share the episode, or leave a comment. It genuinely helps these conversations reach people who need them. But let's get into the topic. There's plenty to be said. I would like to start with Ruchie. I would like to get your thoughts. Like, what was the first thing that came to your mind when you heard of what happened in Bendy Beach in Australia?
Terrible, terrible, terrible thing. This, as you said, is not an isolated incident. It was just a very, very effective one. It's so shocking because so many people were killed and it took so long. There were so many 10 and a half, 11 minutes. These two people were shooting at a crowd of unarmed people, families, the elderly, young children, just coming there to celebrate the holiday. And they're standing on this pedestrian bridge and shooting at people freely for a really, really long time. I mean, it's really hard to understand. And I think that this wasn't the first thing that came to my mind, but it came to me after I was thinking about it for a moment. I couldn't imagine such a thing going on for so long in Israel or even in America, because in both of these countries, as they like to say in America, bad people with guns are stopped by good people with guns. And Australia has extremely strict gun laws, so people don't have guns on them. There would be no guns in the crowd. I don't know if even the police were armed, because we saw those police women I saw running away. I don't know, maybe they were armed and they were just not trained properly or not capable or whatever. It took a very long time until armed police came and killed the gunmen, the terrorists. And it's really, really shocking how helpless these people were. That's really, really, I found extremely shocking that there wasn't proper security for a place like that. And the fact that security is needed is really a terrible, terrible thing. I mean, I grew up in Canada and in the United States. I personally can say that I don't recall myself ever experiencing any anti-Semitism. I know my brothers wore kippah on their head, and a couple of times maybe throughout our childhood they were harassed, but nothing, serious. And there were no security guards on synagogues or Jewish schools or anything of that nature. And it's very, very sad to think that the anomaly is not what's happening now, but rather the period until now, the 70 or so years after the Holocaust, when there was a kind of a moratorium on anti-Semitism. But now that moratorium has worn off, and now we're seeing what the real world looks like.
Yeah, it seems like a life away when one could go to those events and there won't be any police. Now it's just the norm. It's just the norm. I was talking to you guys offline before we get into the podcast. I was at Herzog Park yesterday, and I haven't seen this much of Gardi, as they call it here, or police, just for the international audience. for a very small event. Well, a small event where I don't know how many people were there, maybe 100. We were there for perhaps for an hour, and I just saw a few police. I presume there were more, and I was just not able to identify them, and that's very, very much of a concern. I'd like to ask you the same question, Erez, because this is crucial. How did you react once you were told about the attack in Australia?
I was shaken and deeply saddened because the terrorist attack left 16 dead and dozens wounded, including the 2 Australian police, if I understand correctly. And this is a massive, massive loss. It just doesn't happen in the normal world for 15 people to die of an attack of hostility. It does happen in the United States, shooting at schools, but the background is so different. This is against us Jews. We are targeted, and what I do think is that this was to be expected. It was to be expected because if you distinguish between, let's call it old school anti-Semitism, which peaked in the Nazi era, and the anti-Semitism that exists within Islam, particularly extreme Islamism, then the latter never died. It existed for ages, practically since Muhammad, and it may have relented in certain times, certain periods, and in certain situations, like when the Jews fought shoulder to shoulder with the Muslims against the Crusaders. But other than that, Muslim anti-Semitism, which I see as just a part of the problem, is prevalent. You'd see it anywhere in Cairo, in Damascus, in certain quarters of Brussels, in Birmingham recently, and wherever you find communities of Muslims, as opposed to individuals, you'll find that murderous anti-Semitism.
Ruchie, I want to turn to you just for people out there who are not that familiar as we are with the concept of Aliyah and all that. So this happened very far from us, geographically speaking, okay? And that's what I want to get into, because how next door does that feel for a Jew when it happens, on the other part of the road? Does it feel that is the vicinity, or does it feel far? Can you unpack that for people?
Australia is geographically very far from Israel, but we don't feel far. The world is very small today, and wherever there are Jews, they're our community. We feel a very strong sense of community with Jews everywhere in the world, just as they feel with us. When we're in trouble, they're with us, and when they're in trouble, we're with them. Unfortunately, it's happening everywhere, here and there, and we feel very much close to what's happening. There were quite a few Israelis yesterday. I think an Israeli was killed. I don't know if his name has been released yet, but I think an Israeli was killed there as well. And for sure, we feel very close to what was happening there. And what Erez said, I think that Mein Kampf, Hitler's book, has always been a bestseller in Arab countries. That is, and I know that Israeli soldiers found copies of Mein Kampf in homes in Gaza and in Lebanon. It's not unusual in Arabic. That's always been a bestseller. They have, they found iPads, children's iPads, where the background photo is a picture of Hitler or something like that. So he's always been a hero among the Arab anti-Semites. And I'd like to qualify and say that, of course, not all Muslims, not all Arabs are anti-Semites, and as Erez explained. And in fact, the man, one of the heroes, in Sydney, who attacked barehanded one of the shooters, was in fact an Arab individual who happened to be on the scene, Ahmad al-Ahmad, who's deserving of every praise. And we have good relations now with the countries in the Gulf who take a different view of the Quran. They take a different interpretation of the Quran. They say that the land of Israel belongs to the Jews, that God gave it. That's what it says in the Quran. Unfortunately, the Islamists, the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, and ISIS, and all those of that ilk, they believe that they have a religious duty to kill Jews. It's their religious duty. So, we're fighting here a battle. That's difficult for us to understand is this red-green alliance, and why the left in Europe, in Australia, in America, why they are collaborating with these extreme Islamists, and why the West is committing suicide. I mean, that's the name of Douglas Murray's book, isn't it? How Europe committing suicide. Why is the first thing that the Prime Minister of Australia has to say is to watch out for extreme rightist violence in wake of the attack? That's what bothers him. He never mentions who. First of all, he didn't, in his first response, he didn't even mention that it was a Jewish event, that it was Hanukkah or anything like that. And then he said something about that. But I remember when I hear the word Sydney today, the first thing I think of is October 7th and a rally on the steps of the Sydney Opera House, that iconic building, which had a Hanukkah menorah on it yesterday. But all I can think of is people screaming their Jews back to the gas. That's what I remember of Sydney. That's my first thought when I think of Sydney. And that's very, very sad. What happened to Australia? It used to be a nice country. Okay, Jews felt safe there. Many of the Jews that live there are Holocaust survivors and descendants of Holocaust survivors. Many went to Australia. And we see a lot of Russian Jews went to Australia. It was a welcoming place for Jews. But something's happened. And the same thing is happening in England, in the rest of Europe, unfortunately, in the United States as well. These things are happening. They've opened their doors to this Muslim immigration, and the countries are being taken over from the inside. And they're on a mission. They vote in very high numbers, and they get council members, and they now have representatives in Congress. Countries are being taken over from the inside. They're using democracy to destroy democracy.
Yeah, it's evident.
The first victims are always the Jews, who have been called the canary in the mine. Always. Yeah. It won't end with the Jews, but it always starts with the Jews.
Yeah. I mean, it's evident. I think at this stage, everyone can see it. Just some people don't want to take responsibility because they know that their hands are covered with blood, and if they want to remain in positions of power, they cannot, they cannot be exposed to the public, because they know that those days are gone, and all their reputation, all their prestige will just vanish, and they will be gone. They need to find jobs elsewhere. Erez, I think you want to jump here.
Yes, what I wanted to say is that the bad news for all those countries is that there's a saying in Arabic that after Saturday comes Sunday, meaning after we kill the people that celebrate or observe the Sabbath Saturday, we will turn to those that observe Sunday. Because if the gullible Europeans or Christians mainly think that Jews are the problem, they are seriously mistaken. The Quran distinguishes between the world of Islam, which is anybody who is Muslim, be they in the Arab Peninsula or anywhere else, and the world of war, which defines anyone who's infidel, who is not Muslim, as an enemy. Now, the Jews are the immediate victim, and they also have a problem with Jews in where they considered Muslim lands, Muslim property, Muslim real estate. But other than that, the Europeans are next. The massacre in the Russian theaters made by Chechens was against Christians. Some say 100 to thousands of churches were burned down in Nigeria by Muslims. 400 Christian girls were abducted. Same goes in Egypt, where the Copt Christians are persecuted by Muslims. Same goes in Bethlehem, under the Palestinian Authority, where the Christian population shrank by 80%, mostly by way of immigration. So it's the same everywhere. It's the same in Bataclan, the place in Paris where a rock concert was attacked. It's the same as in London and Madrid subways. It's just another station or another place on the same road to global caliphate. And that the gullible Christians don't understand. The Albaneses of the world think that by sacrificing the Jews, they would appease them. But these are fanatics. As they say in Terminator 1, he seeks and he kills. That's all he does. Same goes for Islamists.
I think that what's happened in the West is the rise of secularism in the past century or so, century and a half, and it's very hard for people who don't believe in God or who aren't guided by religion in their lives to understand that this is guided by theology. And they try to come up with all kinds of explanations that it's because of poverty and all kinds of social problems. And I know, here in Israel, every time there's been an attack, inside Israel of someone, of an Arab attacking an Israeli, or of that nature, not necessarily an Arab Israeli. So they're always try to come up with some kind of mental problem, psychological problem, emotional problem. He had a fight with his wife or whatever. And of course, everyone knows that the first thing you do when you have a fight with your wife is go kill a Jew. Why not? I mean, that's an obvious solution, right? So that's like, whenever these things happen, we see this in France and we see this in other places. The first thing they'll say is, we don't know what the motive was. We don't know what the motive was. We know what the motive was. Okay. And, you're in Ireland, right? So Ireland had its share of terrorism back in the day, and it was the IRA, right? And so people would talk about the IRA and why they were doing it, that they wanted political freedom and they wanted to get rid of the British and all these things. But nobody's talking about why these terrorists are doing it. Nobody talks about it. It's just not discussed. You never hear it. And if anyone tries to bring it up, then the racism accusations, you're a racist.
Islamophobia.
That made up disease.
Not
Why
only
is it
not
always
discussed.
phobia? A phobia, I remember I studied psychology once back in the day, that a phobia is an irrational fear of something, right? Closed places or whatever, right? This is not an irrational fear. This is a very, very rational fear. But you're not even allowed to be afraid. You're not even allowed to have that rational fear, because you'll be accused of being a racist, which is basically the worst thing. Of course, anti-Semitism is okay. That's not included in that definition. But to be accused of being a racist is the worst thing. And so they had in England, they had those grooming gangs and all that went on for years and years and years. And people were afraid to complain to the police, and the police were afraid to act on any of the complaints that they did get because they'd be accused of racism. So, they get the West coming and going. They use the West's liberal values to destroy them, to destroy the West and to destroy its values. And I really hope it's not too late, but I'm afraid it might be.
Yeah, I mean, I can hear you. Your concerns make absolutely sense. If I look at the window, I can smell that there are problems just next street. I mean, you can perceive it. It's just a matter of paying attention to our surroundings, and you can see that they are just growing. They come first as a couple of men, and then all of a sudden there are a couple of cousins, and then the whole family, and then people that they pretend they are relatives, but we all know this is our strategy, and we all know how it starts, and we also know how it ends. We observe this in other parts of the world, not exactly in Europe, but the goal is the same. The goal is to take over and be in charge, and they don't want to coexist. One thing is to have ambitions, like, okay, I want to be part of the structure of the country, but I will make sure that we can all be part of the society. That's fine. I can understand that, but it's clearly not the case. It's clearly they want to be in charge and change the whole structure of society. And it's no wonder that there are already Sharia law courts in many parts of Europe, including in England. And England, as we all know, is the mother of democracy and human rights. So we are seeing an attack right at the core of the European or Western civilization, and the whole thing is falling apart. And as you just said, Jorge, we cannot have open, honest, real conversations about it because some terms, they are just forbidden, and if you use them, then you are a bad person. You'll be excluded from your friends circle. You may lose your job, and then what do you do? So it's very, very scary how they're approaching this situation, because they put the civilization upside down, and then who is stronger? In this case, it may be the Muslim crowd, because they are more and they are strong. They are physically more capable. It's just a matter of time.
So, and you have those huge prayers in the streets in London and in Paris and in New York. You see thousands and thousands of Muslims praying, getting down on their knees and bowing down. They don't do that in their home countries. They pray inside mosques. This is a show of strength. They want to show that they are in charge. That's why they do it. That's the only reason. And again, they're using the West's liberal values, freedom of religion. Does freedom of religion mean you can take over entire streets for hours at a time?
Yeah,
that's not.
Sorry, Erez, let me just bring some civic aspects to the chat, because I think people are going well beyond. It's no problem if you guys disagree, but you already crossed the line. So I'm going to ban you. People want to challenge us. We are here. We mention our names. We are not hiding ourselves. But if you go behind avatars and talking like a 5 years old, sorry, we have no time for that. So just a message for the person that has been saying nonsense in chat box, and for the others that want to participate, the chat box is open if you're able to talk like an adult. Okay. So Erez, apologies. I just want to bring some maturity to the conversation.
Actually, I'm going to barge into an open door. The 2 points I wanted to mention was first that the countries in the Middle East that are more moderate, which is most of the Arabian Peninsula, they are moderate because they suppress Islamists. They hold them in jails, they deport them, they kill them, they persecute them like they would do to anyone else. And the second point is that those countries as well are ruled by force, by minority, by brutality, by cruelness, and that is a characteristic of all Muslim / Arabs societies and countries. Not one real democracy, not even Turkey. Each and every one of them is ruled by force. And the same force exhibits itself like the what you call hiding behind icons. It's the same force and brutality and defiance against facts and truth, because in the Islamist and also Muslim scale of values, Islam is ranked far higher than truth. So if there's a clash between between Islam and its image or its honor and the truth will have to step aside every time. For example, when you tell Muslims that the Quran mandates killing infidels, using women as sex slaves, and waging war on a world that doesn't want war and doesn't threaten Islam in any way, they will tell you that it's not true. I can find the surahs, the specific places in the Quran, such as Surah 9:24, that says, kill them all. Kill them all, behead them. It's not a coincidence that the Taliban and ISIS and militias in Syria and Islamist organizations in many other parts of the world use beheading as the preferred MO to execute someone. That is not a crime. This is something that is commanded by Quran, and they will lie to you in the face and say, no, there's nothing in the Quran, not such a thing in the Quran. And the problem is not only that the discussion is avoided in Europe and in the entire Christian world. The discussion is suppressed. The BBC reported the massacre in Australia as people getting shot, not Jews celebrating a holiday, not Jews celebrating a holiday massacred by Islamists, people getting shot like it's some kind of accident.
Like Obama said, some folks in a supermarket.
Right. Some folks.
Yeah. When I saw the footage, to me, it looked like a video game. It was insane. Like the way the people were being shot, it was like a video game. I have the impression that the guy was just enjoying themselves, on the weekend, and then go home like nothing happened. Like he was this cold. You could see there was no humanity on him. It was just getting rid of people like they were doves.
Right, and there's a point I'd like to address. There's a term among Jews in Israel, righteous among the nations, meaning people who, despite general anti-Semitism, act to the benefit of Jews, like they were Dutch people who saved Jews in the Holocaust and other instances. And this person who snatched the weapon of the father of the terrorist is most certainly righteous among the nations, and it's what he did is commendable, even if it were only for saving his own life, which I'm not sure it was. I don't want to diminish the greatness of his act, but we need to understand that when it comes to Islam, individuals and majorities and even vast majorities don't call the shots. The radical extremists, those who are more brutal, more forceful, more ruthless and more organized are those who establish set the policy. And if the policy is to stick to those surahs, those sentences in the Quran that say, kill them all, behead them, humiliate them, have sex with your wife and any captive woman, those who choose to stick to those commandments are not even don't even have to be the majority of the Muslim collective. In time, like the Taliban did in Afghanistan, like Hamas did in Gaza, they practically tame the whole population, because even in excuse me, among the very anti-Semitic Ukrainians in the Holocaust, there were righteous among the nations. In Gaza, not one. That means that even if Hamas was a minority that took over the population, the collective, if you will, it has by now indoctrinated the whole population, or at least the vast majority, to the point of paralyzation of any objection, let's say.
I want to draw attention for the viewers. There's a poll I put in place, and I would like you guys to answer. The question is, do you feel Jewish communities worldwide are less safe today than they were prior to October 7? At the moment, there is an overwhelming understanding that, yes, there is a significant fear among the Jewish community. So most of the votes were in that direction. There's an odd vote saying no, and I would like to understand why they think that Jews are not more concerned than they were prior to October 7 when it comes to safety. And someone just replied, and sure, depends on the country. So if this person can be more specific, that's something that we can debate later on. I'd like to ask you, Ruchie, because it seems to me that they always mask this, let's call it incident, just to make it easy here, as a reaction to the so-called abuse of the Israel Defense Forces in Gaza. So somehow they need to react, and the only way they can is to shoot innocent people in a beach, including a 10-year-old. How can that be justified, like among people who go to university, people have the opportunity to read a book? It's just insane, but it seems that people cannot question that, and they just accept it like it's 1 + 1 = 2.
Well, we live in this age of political correctness where you're not allowed to say the truth. You're just not allowed to. I remember quite a few years ago, maybe 12 or 13 years ago, I was working. I'm an interpreter, and I was working with a gentleman from Belgium who was teaching a company how to use a certain machine, and I was interpreting from English. He spoke English and into Hebrew for that. And while they were given some kind of assignment, and we would sit on the side and just chat. And I said, you're from Belgium. You have a serious problem in Belgium. You're not having children, and only the Muslims are having children. So very soon you're going to have a very, very large Muslim population in your country. And this was apropos things that we were talking about. And he just went pale when I said that. And he said to me, he just was very shocked. And he said, we're not allowed to talk about it. He didn't respond to what I said. He said, we're not allowed to talk about it. And when everybody in the news and in politics are using euphemisms instead of talking about what has actually happened, then you cannot address the problem. Everybody's saying, well, Trump is a racist because he only wants to bring good immigrants into America. Well, that was the policy of every country in the world until about 15 minutes ago, right? That countries only brought in immigrants who would contribute to their society, not those who would harm their society. That's kind of a no-brainer, isn't it? I mean, the only country, in fact, in the world that would allow in people that other countries wouldn't allow in. Israel would bring in all Jews, no matter what their situation. If they were poor, if they couldn't work, they could work. If they were ill, whatever, they brought them in. But that was really an outlier. Israel is an outlier in that. For centuries, countries have only allowed people who would contribute to their societies in. And now, if you say something like that, you're a racist. If Trump says, he doesn't want these people, they're criminals in his country, then he's a racist. And it's like, you can't you cannot say it. You cannot say these words. You are not allowed to. I saw a segment on CNN where one of the interviewees tried to say that these were, Muslims were creating a lot of problems there. The Somalians in Minnesota and now in Ohio, we're hearing, are defrauding the country and so. And the host just wouldn't let her continue. And we don't talk like that here. We don't say those things here. You cannot speak the truth, and then you are blind if you cannot discuss what is behind this. That there is a theology, that they have a mission to take over the countries. It's not, they are a political Islam, which is Islam. Islam is not a religious doctrine only. It is a political doctrine. And it is nothing, there's nothing racist about having objections to a political philosophy or even a theological philosophy. You can be anti-Christian, you can be anti-Judaism. That's okay, but you can't be anti-Islam. You're not allowed. That's Islamophobic. And that's the new taboo. That's what you're not allowed to be. And if you cannot name it, then you cannot address it.
I would like to address.
We've tied our hands behind our back. We've tied our tongues together, and we're not allowed to talk about the problem. We're not allowed to do anything about the problem. I say we, meaning the Western world. And here we are.
I'd like to address the alleged connection between anti-Semitism and October 7th. The spike in anti-Semitism started October 8th. Not when the IDF went into Gaza to fight Hamas.
Which was a couple weeks later.
Right. But it started to spike before there could be any allegation about Israel being cruel to Gaza. And the Western gullibility of buying all these lies is fueled by billions of dollars from Qatar and such places that manipulate public opinion. That's why I wanted to differentiate in the beginning between old school anti-Semitism and what we see now. They are different. The old school Semitism that says you killed Jesus or you poisoned wells when the Black Plague hit Europe, this one hasn't really reared its head. What reared its head is it's shape-shifting to cruelty to Arabs, which is pushed by Arab countries and Qatar and people who eat from their hands, both economically and otherwise.
Yeah, I want to raise a point here, which I think is worth discussing, is the alliance between the hard left and the Islamists. And to me, there is a common ground that maybe explains or at least justifies this strange love story between the two. One is we all know that the Arabs hate the fact that Israel is the river of democracy, an oasis in the Middle East, and it's not enough that it's not sufficient that Israel is the river of democracy. Is a country that is improving year by year. It's going on the right direction. Prosperity. It's a key element of the Israeli society. Of course, there are people and people, but in general, the country is healthy in many aspects, at least something that the Arab nations cannot even dream of. The other thing is that really bothers the hard left in the West is the fact that Israel is an ethno state. It doesn't really follow this diversity trends that we see in the EU and in North America, in particular Canada. So I think there is this common disgust from the hard left and the Islamists, and that's probably the reason why they end up in bed. Does that make sense to you guys, or how would you approach
this
that?
is what's known as the Red-Green Alliance, red meaning the leftists and green being the color of Hamas and Islamists. They share a hatred for the West. They share an abhorrence of Western civilization and its values, especially the United States, and they all hate Israel. So that's what they share. But what the left doesn't understand is that they will be the next course in the meal.
Yep.
The Islamists won't stop just because they've taken over a country or taken over, God forbid, Western civilization. They will, it's like the vegetarians who think that the lion won't eat them because they don't eat meat. No. They are on the menu.
That's a nice illustration. How do you see this love story between people that apparently they shouldn't?
Well, it's not a love story; it's a shared hate story. They hate the same things. That's what unites them. Their shared hatred.
Yeah,
no real love
maybe
there. I mean,
we can say
talking about people who are in favor of transsexualism and homosexualism and all these things, all these woke things, and these when you see gays for Gaza, I mean it's absurd. Of course, they'd be hung from cranes or thrown off buildings if they were in Gaza. There's no question about it. So it's impossible to explain rationally. In Hebrew, we have a saying that love or hate can make you do things that you would never otherwise do. And here it's hate.
Yeah, that's a good example.
I think it's synergy. It's synergy because in the post national state era, or at least ideology, their purpose of destabilizing countries actually come together, and that is something that radical Islam and the left share. So and the synergy is not only in the common purpose, but also in the legitimacy, because if someone who is hard left hates Israel because it's a nation state, because it's traditional, because it has religious elements, then when someone comes and say they also deprive poor Palestinians of their rights, then even if the first person could perceive that what lies beneath his views is anti-Semitism and racism, the Muslim gives him legitimacy. And the same goes the other way. If you hate Israel because the Quran commands, because the Quran says that all the Jews are pigs and apes, which it does, and that all of them should be killed, or at least humiliated and persecuted, like since Muhammad happened again and again and again and again, then you might think in the modern world, wait a minute, there's something wrong with it. It's not reciprocal, it's not fair. But then comes this lefty or communist and says, these Jews that Muhammad commands you to kill, they are also racists, and they don't want you, and they are taking over your land, which never happened, by the way, because Jews actually bought most of the land of Israel, and up to 1 million Jews were deprived of all their possessions in Arab countries. So, but as I said before, facts don't matter. Feelings matter. Legitimacy matters. And the only thing that is not reciprocal, in my opinion, is the trust. Because the left sees the Muslims as those poor, oppressed people, those blacks that suffer from white colonialism and things like that. And they actually believe it. They believe it, and they feel a kind of solidarity with the Muslims. But that is one way, because the Islamists would like or aspire to have all the world, including the West, including Christians, including communists, including lefties, including gays, all be subjugated to Islam. So they keep the act until they have the opportunity to have their way.
Yeah. As I said at the start, this is not an isolated case. This is a part of a pattern that is just expanding, and it's happening in many parts of the world. We cannot say that we are immune if we are in Central Europe or in South America, or even in Asia. Like I was shocked the other day when I got to see a footage of the relatively aggressive pro-Palestinian protest in Lithuania. Like, first, with all the respect, Lithuania is not much on the news. I hope the Lithuanians won't be upset with me. It's kind of a quiet country. But then they were on the news for the wrong reasons. You'll never think that there will be, and I would say, like, at least in this protest, there will be, I don't know, 30, 50 people, which is quite a lot if you think of a country that, it's not really into these sort of battles. They are more interested in their own affairs. And I would say most of them, at least as I could understand from the footage, were young. And the reason is, I would say, social media, because they don't really pay attention to their surroundings. They are more interested in becoming Westerns. Because there's this whole thing in Europe that if you are Western, then you are advanced. But they should learn that, yes, there are perks from living in Western Europe, but we got a lot of things wrong over the last few years, and perhaps we need to be called out instead of being imitated. They should see, okay, there are a couple of errors there that we better don't import into our nations. And I think that the youth doesn't seem to understand that. They still, I think what also is still taking place is in those nations that may explain some love story with Arabs. They don't want to be like the Russians, and they know that the Russians are just next door. So that might explain their affinity to the West, because they are still thinking about what happened to their ancestors when the Russians were around. And if the West is against Russia and somehow having sympathy for the Palestinians, maybe that's the route they should take. Now, this is not a justification, but it might be the rationale for these sort of conversations in the Lithuanian streets that I would never guess. But we need to watch the youth, especially those who are in university, because they are brainwashed all the time.
A kind of an initiation rite to become part of the West.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Like, I think universities in this day and age, they are not very, very useful unless you need some technical background to get into the profession you fancy and you have the skills. I think people are better off learning skills online, networking, because all you get is gender standings and that kind of crap. Like, and unless you have a technical path designed for your career, I don't see any benefit for universities. You guys are also concerned with the current state of academic, and how is it in Israel? Is there any echoes of this nonsense, or are you guys distant from what's going on in Europe?
Well, the universities in Israel, not all of them, but most of them are also very left-leaning. The academia tends to be very left-leaning. They want to be accepted by their peers around the world. They want to be invited to conferences and get their papers published in prestigious journals. So they tend to kowtow to the same kind of leftist, anti-Israel, anti-Zionist ideology. But I don't think that it's as widespread among the general academic population and student population as it is in other countries. Israel's got real problems. So there's less students when students come to Israeli universities. They're much older than they are in most Western countries, who come right out of high school and go into university when they're 18 years old. In Israel, they usually go. They do their military service. Sometimes they do a year of volunteering, and then they go on a trip around, to India or somewhere else, South America, or whatever, on a trek for a long period. And they may come to university 5-6 years after they've completed high school, and they're usually working on the side also, because they may also, have to support themselves and maybe getting married already around that time. So they're supporting a family and going to school. So they don't have time for a lot of, there isn't this campus life like there is in America. People go to their classes, come home, go to work, and the students don't have time or patience for a lot of this. So there's a lot less campus activity of that kind that you see on American campuses here in Israel. So there's much less of that, because people are dealing with real life problems, and not, their parents are paying their tuition and they're, taking care of them and so on. And they have a lot of too much time on their hands, too much TikTok to watch, and too much stuff that's affecting them. So by the time people come to university in Israel, they already kind of have a mindset, and they're much less gullible and less able to be influenced by, extreme leftist rhetoric than I think in American or European universities. Would you agree with me, Erez?
Yes, I believe that people have become woke in a different sense, because if you believe in strict equality, and maybe you even reject the notion that the Jews are entitled to their own state, and then you act on your opinions. You take Palestinian children to hospitals, you join conferences for peace, you employ Arabs, and do all these very good things. And the very people you employ use their visits to get reconnaissance and information in order to commit the worst atrocity to the Jewish people suffered since the Holocaust. And you learn that the mothers of Palestinian children saved in Israeli hospitals still wish they would be martyrs against Jews. You start to understand what you have been ignorant to, sometimes willfully, all your life. So the opinions are shifting. Fanatics like fanatics will never face the facts. That will never happen.
Can't confuse them with the facts.
Right, exactly. They are so noble and honorable that they don't see color. But while being colorblind, they also insist on being culture blind and history blind and statistic blind and fact blind. That's the willful part, because they, like the BBC, don't want to see that Jews are being massacred by Muslims for religious reasons, not territorial, not historic, not revenge for anything, just spite. Nothing. They don't want to see that. I do want to address the position of former Eastern Bloc countries. On the one hand, they have experienced totalitarian rule and torture and secret police and thought police and everything that communism brought with it. On the other hand, these areas in the world, and I don't want to say peoples, not to, God forbid, offend people who actually took part in the extermination of Jews. These parts of the world were extremely religious, Christian religious, and virulently anti-Semitic. Since the fall of the Soviet Union and communism, religion has made a comeback in those areas of the world. And sometimes I feel personally it comes with a serious degree of anti-Semitism, which is not necessarily consciously religious in nature, but it's there. It's there somewhere. The Jews are bad in some way, and the return of religion, this comeback, lends legitimacy to those views. I hope that former Eastern Bloc countries like Poland, that says we have no Muslims, no dirt in the streets, no crime, and no terrorism. I hope they stick to it. But having visited Prague not 2 weeks ago, I can tell you that you hear Arabic on the streets, and not all of them are tourists. And I want to mention a book called Islam, Slavery, and Terrorism, which says that the level of defiance, of crime, of terrorism is in complete correlation to the percentage of Muslims in the community, in the country. That's why there are terror networks in Belgium. That's why Spain is anti-Semitic, because they have so many people from the Maghreb, from North Africa. And that's why England is becoming hostile, more and more hostile, I should say, to Jews, to nationalists, to English, to the Union Jack, because the Muslims are becoming a larger and larger portion of the population, to the extent that they force their own scale of values, in which, as I said before, Islam is more important than truth, let alone personal rights and human rights, such as expressing an opinion, going to work, not being gang raped by Pakistanis according to the Quran, etc., etc.
Yeah, you touch a very interesting point when you mention what's going on in England, and I think it clearly tells that the more Muslims they have among their population, the more the politicians are going to favor them, because if they want votes, then they need to think of numbers. To be honest, I mean, I'm not coming up with something extraordinary. That's just how politics work. If they see that there is a majority of Muslims, they're going to orientate their policies in that direction. And if Jews are less than 1%, why should they take in consideration the Jewish communities? They just don't matter. And that's the tendency. It's already ugly, and it's going to be a complete monster maybe in a decade or two. And we can only see it happening through fertility. We can only see the inaction of some aspects of society. in parallel, and that gives me some hope. I can see more and more people linking the dots, putting their ideas together, gathering with others, trying to come up with some plans of action that perhaps they can have some effect in the wider society. There are political parties on the rise who oppose that sort of approach for their countries, and some of them are actually very popular, like in the case of UK. I would say in the UK, if there'll be an election next week, for sure reform will win. And actually, what I found very strange, how Keir Starmer can remain in power for that long, because you guys remember, like before him, I think there were like 3 or 4 prime ministers in, I don't know, 5-6 years, something like that. And this man is tied to power, like in a way that I cannot describe. I think there should be like a huge lobby supporting that we are not aware of. But I think it's a matter of time, because, as I said, if there will be an election, the labor will be humiliated. And they know that because they abandoned the men on the streets. And the men on the streets, yeah, they can be quiet for some time, but at some point, they're going to go after the politicians, and it's not going to be pretty.
Well, it's the same story with the Democrats in America, that the Republicans have now become the party of the working class, rather than the Democrats used to be. That's why the Jews were always Democrats, because the Democrats were for the working class and for common people and so on and so forth. And that's always been, even wealthy Jews have always wanted to help the weaker elements of society and so on and so forth. And now it's the Republican Party. I don't know how much we can trust them, because what we see happening now in among the Republicans is really very frightening in America. So, I think that, Qatar is paying for a lot of those voices that we're hearing. I don't want to mention any names. I don't want to get sued, but I think we all know who I'm referring to. This outburst of vile anti-Semitism on the part of certain podcast hosts. It's just it's really shocking to see, and it's really frightening to see what's happening. This kind of rifting within the American right, especially since Charlie Kirk's assassination. It's really frightening. It seems that he was the force holding them together somehow, and it's very worrying. And you mentioned England. Of course, I saw this video yesterday of a young boy saying, maybe 12, 13 years old, talking about how he's being forced in school to study Islam. And the interviewer asks him, "Were you taught about the Battle of Hastings?" He said, "Nope." "Were you taught about Agincourt?" "Nope." "Were you taught about this, taught about that?" All kinds of, major points in British history. "No." He says, "We have to learn about the Quran. We have to learn about Islam." He said, "I don't want to learn about that. That's not my culture." He's a little boy, a little smart boy. And, you see the rise of populist leaders like Tommy Robinson, that a lot of people, are afraid of. And I think he's speaking what a lot of people feel. But, I don't know how legitimate he is considered in the UK. Do you think that actually, if there were elections, the Reform Party would take the elections?
I think so. I don't know if they'll be able to form a government, or they will need a coalition.
We saw that in Holland, of course.
But perhaps that will be the beginning, if they can at least put some pressure on the government. I can give an example from my own country, from Portugal. So the equivalent of Reform, they are now political party number 2. So they are not in government, but their voice matter. We have a center right wing in government, and they do relatively okay when it comes to migration. They are trying to close some doors. I mean, they cannot do anything they want, because there's still Brussels, next door barking. Yeah. But the fact that party is there and they are now number 2, I can clearly see that it's more relevant than people presume. Because
and
typically,
we see what's happening in South America as well.
Yes, we
Chile,
see that.
Just now, the elections in Chile and Argentina, of course, and other countries moving over to the right. when we say right, left, I don't think the terms refer to what they referred to, 70 years and 80 years ago. It's not exactly the same. The left has become fascist, and it's the right that is not fascist now. So the labels can be misleading, right?
Yeah, I would like to actually to explore that, because I'm still not clear about it myself. So that's why I would like to open here the conversation with you, because I sometimes think that yes, the left became fascist, but there's another part of me who believes that they always had that tendency. Just they were not in charge. They couldn't afford. So the appetite existed, just they didn't have the means and the resources to put in place. And you can clearly see, like, if you look at this George Orwell book, The Animal Farm, then once the pigs are in power, then they become even worse than the humans. And we all know that some leftists are not that different from those pigs, with all the respect for the pigs.
Don't insult the pigs; they don't deserve it.
Yeah. So let's be cautious here and not bring the pigs to the plate. But you know what I mean with this metaphor, because most people, once they are in power, they reveal their true colors, and you can clearly see with the left wing, once they have the sword and the shield, you better walk away, because they are very, very dangerous.
Yeah, well, I think that the labels have been misleading, because the Nazi Party, I mean, it was called the National Socialist Party. It was not a right-wing party. It was a left-wing party. It was against communism, but it was still a socialist party. So, yeah, I think you have to judge them by their actions, not by what they claim that they believe in.
Right. I think the main reason why, so I just say one thing. I mean, the main reason why we still think that the Nazis were right-wing is because they opposed Soviet Union in the war. So we tend to think if you didn't join the Soviet Union in the war, which they did for a while, but that was a strategy, maybe they were right-wing. But that's the main thing, because other than that, they were very similar to the Eastern Bloc. Erez.
Yes, there's a line connecting the Bolsheviks of the October Revolution of 1917 with Mamdani and the mayor of Seattle, the new mayor of Seattle, that said that she would forbid companies to leave the city, even if they are not profitable because of minimum wages. And that line goes through the Nazi regime, because the Nazis based their social model and the system of concentration camps on the Bolshevik one. They followed the very same models. The SS was and the Gestapo were modeled after the Russian secret services, the NKVD, I think it was at the time, and the same. In that sense, the Nazis were socialist, because they took power from the individual and gave it to the party, which represented the collective, exactly like the Bolsheviks and the communists. Exactly. And the same goes for Mamdani, who is a self-declared communist. And the same goes for other Democrats who have completely forgotten what it is to be a liberal. To be a liberal today and to support human rights and freedom of speech and freedom of occupation, etc., etc. Occupation in the sense of work lies with the right globally. Not only the Republicans in the United States, but also with parties that we may not necessarily like the extreme or not, maybe not so extreme right party in France, of the Le Pen party, and what characterizes these parties and these movements, which I think are grassroots movements, is that they are against the totalitarianism of the communists and socialists and Democrats.
Globalists.
What?
Globalists.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now that you talk about the states, I think we didn't discuss that as far as I remember, but there were some Jews who voted for Mamdani. Like, how can you explain that? Like, would you like to share your thoughts? Maybe I know you are disturbed with that idea, but that's a fact. So we need to face it. How would you approach it?
Well, I think I have to go to Gad Saad. You know, he coined that term suicidal empathy, and I think that's probably what is infecting all people all over the West, and especially leftist Jews. Leftist Jews, you know, Jews have a tendency to be religious, and if it's not Judaism, they've got to find something else to fill that void, and so they become very extreme, often at other isms and ideologies, and a lot of leftist Jews, they just want to be like everybody else. Their religion, they say that they are Jewish, and they are Jewish, but they believe in something called Tikkun Olam, which means repairing the world. That is the most important tenet of their faith, not classic Judaism at all. And anything that, you know, can talk a good game, they'll go for it. And especially if he's a Democrat, then they are, I think some of these Jews are just physically and psychologically unable to vote for the right. And they are suicidal. I can't explain it rationally. There's no rational way to explain it. I mean, it's anyone, you know, Mamdani talked up a good gain, ran a good campaign. He obviously had a lot of money, and he had good campaign managers. But, you know, it's not hard to see through him. We know, but these are Jews that don't, you know, they're the same Jews who might be like that woman yesterday in Sydney who came to the memorial 24 hours after the massacre there, wearing a kafia in protest of the Israeli flags being shown. Yes, a Jewish woman with a kafia.
A Jewish woman.
A Jewish woman. Can't explain it. There's no rational way. There is something very self-destructive about some of these people. You know, they don't understand that we're all in the same boat together, and if they drill a hole, we're all going to sink. And they don't understand. I can't explain it. I really can't. I've never been able to understand it.
I'd like to try.
I'm genuinely shocked with that woman. I would say that she was driven by narcissism. She knew she will be on the spot. She'll be all over social media, and her life sucks. So she took that opportunity just to be someone.
I think you explained it earlier. I don't remember which one of you was, but that what counts is feelings, not facts, right? Yeah. So, you know, if you feel, that's more important than.
I'd like to try to explain. I think that traditionally, Jews have sided with minorities against against tyrants, against brutes like the Nazis, against inequality, and they have not yet woken up to the fact that the people that used to represent these values, the Democrats in the States, the Labour in the UK, do not longer uphold these values. They are either self-interested, to remain in power, to get elected again, to get the support of mayors of 7 of England's largest cities. which are all Muslim, and we're joined by Mamdani. Okay, these Jews don't want to bother with the facts. They stick to what they're used to. Right wing is Nazi, and therefore Trump is a fascist, and so is Netanyahu, by the way, in their opinion. And
Candace
the
Owens
left
called him a demon.
and the left could do no wrong, in their opinion. Everything the left says, like Stalin, is sacred. Stalin was referred to throughout the communist world, including some parties in Israel, as the son of all peoples. Son, the star, I mean, and he could do no wrong. And I think these people are prisoners of their own prejudice, and it wasn't always prejudice, although in many cases labor was anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, and etc. But there was an appearance of fairness, which is no longer there. Those values of human rights are crash against the rocks of reality, where the rights of humans are determined by their religion, their race, by politics, etc., etc., and not by their humanity. Same goes for Jews. As far as some Australians are concerned, the Jews got what they deserved. Although some of them are not Zionists, some of them are ex-Israelis who left Israel for probably better life, many of them. And still, it's the Jews who got what they deserved because of the synergy I talked about before, etc., and because the left can do no wrong.
So I just closed the poll, and I would like to get your thoughts on it. So I'll put it on the screen here. So we have do you feel Jewish communities worldwide are less safe today than they were prior to October? 80% say significantly yes, 10% say no, and sure depends on the country. 10% somewhat zero. So there's an overwhelming consensus that Jews are more at risk than they were prior to October 7, when I would say in a national road, it should be the opposite, because the road should unite and think there's someone threatened. We should do our best that this is not going to be repeated and in our soil. And what we are observing is the opposite. Your thoughts on that, Ruchie?
Well, as Erez said earlier, anti-Semitism is a shape-shifting kind of virus that in every period, era, it takes on a different shape. You know, once it was religious, and then it became racial, and now it's about human rights. And whatever it will be in the future, who knows? You would think that the normal reaction, and it was a reaction among many people on October 7th, would be solidarity with Israel and the terrible, terrible thing that happened that day. But a lot of people celebrated it. I think we were all very, very, very shocked to see that. As you said, it was already on October 7th and October 8th that they were celebrating before Israel even had a chance to respond to what happened, when we were still reeling from the shock and still literally fighting the terrorists off. They were still in Israel on October 8th and October 9th and so on. And they were already celebrating this on campuses and in various cities around the world. Anti-Semitism is like a symptom of a disease. And when that disease is present, the symptom is very strong. And in those places where they fight it, where they give the right antibiotic, then that symptom is weakened. It doesn't disappear completely. Look at Hungary today. Hungary is probably one of the safest countries in the world today for Jewish. The joke is that the second most common language spoken in Budapest is Hungarian, because the first language is Hebrew. It's a very, very popular tourist site for Israelis. Go there for the weekend, go there a few days, and you can completely relax because you don't have to be vigilant like you do in other countries, because it's safe for Jews there. And why is it safe for Jews there? Because the government won't tolerate any anti-Semitism. It's always led from the top. Always led from the top. We don't have to go back. We don't have to look very far. If we look, for example, at Denmark during World War II, the king put on the yellow star, and all the people of Denmark put on the yellow star after the king did it, and they managed to smuggle out all their Jews out from the Nazis' clutches to Sweden. And if the leadership gives in, kowtows, as you said, looking for the popular Muslim vote and so on and so forth, as we see in almost all of Europe, then the anti-Semitism flourishes. When the leadership stands up to it, and Prime Minister Netanyahu sent out a message, I think it was today, to the leaders of the world, that they have to be the ones leading the fight on anti-Semitism. And he's 100% right, because when the leadership caves into anti-Semitism, whether they are themselves anti-Semites or not, it doesn't even matter that much, then it just takes off everywhere. It takes off, and it becomes impossible to control. If the leadership puts their foot down and doesn't allow it, and that's why we're seeing countries like in France, we're seeing someone like Marine Le Pen, who would have been anathema to everyone, a few decades ago. None of us would have touched her with a 10-foot pole, but she's actually leading the fight on anti-Semitism. She hates Muslims. She doesn't want Muslims to take over France. So, it's not difficult to imagine that she wouldn't like it if Jews took over France either, or anybody else for that matter. But she doesn't seem to be, in her behavior at least, anti-Semitic. On the contrary. And we're seeing that in a lot of countries. It's like a litmus test. It's a litmus test. If there's anti-Semitism, then the country is diseased. There's something very, very wrong with the country. Maybe that's part of our fate as being the light unto the nations, or the chosen people, or whatever you want to call it. We were chosen for something really, really difficult, but that's what it is.
Yeah, you mentioned that the Budapest is a just illustrate one example. I was there in September. My girlfriend is how they call it, a Hungarian from Transcarpathia, which means she's Ukrainian, but her roots are Hungarian. So one of the days I went to the thermal baths, the big ones. I went by myself. I just wanted to be in peace. I couldn't, because it was flooded with people, and among these people there were a few Israelis, and it's not hard to spot the Israelis, because we all know how loud are the Israelis. So I could still, there are some Israelis there, and there was no issue. They were not being intimidated. They're not being frightened. Myself, I was with my high, which I don't know if it's visible, not a problem. I don't know if I would do it here in Ireland. I don't know if I would do it. And if I would do it, to be just to, let's say, to show that I am what I am, and I don't care what's going to happen. It would be a defiance position. There, it was just normal. So I think it's very, very good. I would say that in places or like Hungary or Central Eastern Europe, if there is any anti-Semitism, and there is, it's still from the traditional right wing. I think it's still coming from there. And I think one of the reasons why the left in those places, which is still relatively small, is not vocal against Israel, because I think there is a taboo because of the Holocaust. Now, I fear, that's me, my projection, that once most of the Holocaust survivors are not around, that might change in a generation or two, but we'll see. We'll see. That's something to keep in mind, because at the moment it's I think in places like Hungary or Poland, it looks very bad to go against Israel, because it might be seen as doing what their grandparents were doing in the 40s. So I don't know if the memory can be gone and we can see those things returning in some shape or form. Hopefully I'm wrong, but I think at the moment they think twice before acting in a way that can resemble their grandparents.
There's obviously a potential there. It never
Yeah.
goes
Mhm.
away, as I said. It doesn't go away. It's really, really up to the leadership to make sure it doesn't rear its head again.
Yeah.
Because, it's under the surface. But it's controllable in those countries now. I'm not
It
sure it's because of
depends.
Holocaust memory, because there are other countries like Lithuania wasn't so, great to the Jews in the Holocaust, or Ukraine, right? So, yeah.
It depends if the leadership takes action or prefers lip service. Like retroactively, I think Biden and Harris did.
Hmm.
They rhetorically they were great. They were great talking about Jews being slaughtered and etc. etc. But de facto, what they did was to put obstacles in the way of Israel to defend itself, which means getting more Jews dead.
Sorry, I just interrupted you, Erez.
I'm done. I'm just saying that we need to be careful of getting too enthusiastic about rhetorics of Western leaders.
Oh, for sure.
Because
Yes.
many times they are just they are faking it. They are faking it, and there's nothing substantial behind it.
Yeah, and I think there are always hidden interests. Like if they are standing with Israel, it's because there's something there behind. I truly fear that often when you see some support, it's not coming from heart. It's coming from something else, and often it's not pretty. But if it works, it works. Just we need to be pragmatic, especially in these
Absolutely.
circumstances. But we cannot just rely long term. We just make the partnership. It's okay for a time being, but we should keep an eye because things can change in the blink of an eye. And yeah,
Absolutely.
just to finalize for you guys, now that we can see the global Intifada, it's not a myth. It's taking place. It's gonna get worse. Like, do you have any word for the Jews out there who feel unsafe? Perhaps they can rethink, the next few years.
Well, I think Jews everywhere know that they have a place to go if they have to. I would like to see them come here because they want to, not because they have to, but they can come here whenever they want. And I think we have to teach Jews also outside, to protect themselves, and they must not be ashamed of who they are. They must not hide who they are. I know it's easier said than done, but I don't think that's any solution whatsoever. They have to be proud of who they are.
A dear friend of mine lives in Australia. He left Israel many years ago. He has a beautiful family there. And the only thing I had to say to him today was to watch out. Be careful. Because uprooting and packing your life and coming to Israel, even if it were easy, which is not, then it takes time. It takes time, and the fact that someone is busy with making aliyah and coming to Israel doesn't mitigate the risks. So watch out wherever you are. Our heart is with you.
I think that's a very beautiful way to finish the session. So I want to thank Ruchie and Erez for your clarity, your honesty, your willingness to share something serious with the subject that is still very, very hot. So thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate you both taking the time to be part of the conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And what we
Nice to
discussed
see you
tonight
again.
is likewise. I hope to see each other in Israel in February. I'm coming over only for a few
wonderful.
days. So I'm coming for my birthday. So hope we can meet up and and
To
chat in
celebrate.
person. Yeah, and it's always different. These screens are great, but there's nothing like a face-to-face
Absolutely.
conversation.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
what we discussed tonight, just for the viewers, it's not just about headlines or online or argument. It's about a lived reality. It's about what happens when intimidation, radicalization, and denial are allowed to become normalized. You don't have to agree with everything we said here to recognize that the Jewish communities across the road are feeling something shift, and that pretending otherwise helps no one. So if you found this conversation valuable, I would encourage you to subscribe to the channel, share the episode, and leave thoughtful comments, especially if you are watching the replay. Engagements help this conversation reach beyond the usual bubbles. If you want to support this kind of long form, respectful discussion, you are also welcome to join the channel as a member. The link is in the description. And most importantly, keep listening, keep thinking, keep speaking with clarity rather than just fear. So thank you very much for being here tonight, and I see you all very soon. Have a good evening.
Thank
Good
you.
evening. Shalom.